Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nader. This is going to be a exercise or problem set based video for the conditional statements that we went over in JavaScript together. So if you want more practice with how conditionals work and just kind of some especially tricky questions just to see how they would work in more complex scenarios, definitely go through these questions with me. Let's get right into it. Okay, so as with the other videos, I just have a few files that we're going to go through together. I've written up here in the comments kind of what the instructions for the exercise actually is. So I encourage you to give that a read. I'll go through them as well verbally, and then I'll give you a second to actually try that out before we actually code it together. Okay, so for this warm-up, we want to first create a variable called points that starts at the number 40. Then we want to create an if statement that checks to see if points are greater than 20. And in the case that that's true, where the points are greater than 20, we want to subtract 10 from points. Then at the end of the program, so after this conditional statement, we want to log out what the points are. So regardless of what the conditional statement does, we want to log out the points. Then we want to kind of change this value to actually see how we can get different things printed out in this program. So you can change points to start at 15 instead of at 40. Give that a shot and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so create a variable called points starts at 40. I should say starts at 40. And since I know that we're going to be changing points, so specifically here we want to subtract from points, I know that we need to be able to manipulate this variable. So I'm going to create it as a let variable, because if this was a const variable, we can't change a constant variable. If we started it as const, you can always change it to let later. So I'm going to say let points, and we want to start this as 40. We can have done this on one line or two. Then we want to do an if statement, and we want to check if the points are greater than 20. Then what we want to do is we want to subtract 10 from the points. So there's a few ways to do this. We can say points is equal to points minus 10, or the short form for this would be points minus equals 10. I'll go with the short form and just comment this one out just so you can see it for reference. And at the end of the program, we want to log out what the points actually are. So I'll do console.log and I'll console log out the points. Okay, so I'm just going to open up my terminal here on the right hand side. I'm going to make sure I'm in the right directory. I'm going to use node to run the warmup. And you can see in this case, I'm getting 30, which is what's being logged out on line 16 here. And that's showing us that we're starting at 40. This is actually being true, or evaluating to true. And then we enter the conditional clause where we're subtracting 10 from points. So now points has been reassigned to be 30, and we're logging that out. So then we're saying, what happens if we start points at 15? So if I change this to 15, give that a minute to think what that might actually do and how this will change what gets printed out. So you might think that if it starts at 15, we're going to come in here and we're going to look at points. Is that greater than 20? So this question is now going to evaluate to false, right? So it's not true that 15 is greater than 20, which means that we're actually going to skip all of this code. We're not going to enter this conditional block, and we're going to go straight to printing out points. So we should see 15, and we do. Perfect. So with that, let's go to the first exercise or problem set. I'll just give myself more space here. It's a lengthy set of instructions here. So let's just go through this. We want to first print out this string right here, animal checker program. That should be pretty simple. Then we want to create a variable called animal that starts at the value cat. So a string cat, C-A-T. And if animal is equal to cat, we want to do something. So we want to create an if statement that's checking to see if it's true that animal is equal to cat. And if it is, then we want to print out meow. We also want to check if it's equal to dog. And if it's equal to dog, then we want to print out woof. If it's neither cat nor dog, then we want to print out must be an alien. All right, because that's the only three things you can be in this world, a cat or a dog or an alien. And at the end of the program, so now what ends up happening, very similar to this first line of code over here, we want to print out that the animal check is complete. Okay, and just to get practice to make sure your code is actually working correctly, because this is actually a little bit trickier than it seems, make sure you test this with animal starting out as all three values. Well, in this case, either cat, dog, or pretty much anything that's neither cat nor dog. So give that a try, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so at the very start, we want to do this console log that we have over here. So I'm just going to copy this. Hopefully that wasn't too long for you to type out. Then comes where we're starting our animal variable. So we're not actually changing this, so it's fine to create as a const variable in here. We're going to say it's equal to the string cat, C-A-T. Now we want to check if animal is equal to cat, just like this. I'm going to use a strict equal, so 3 equals right here, and my ligatures in my editor are actually combining that into kind of one bigger symbol. But this is 3 equal signs, a strict equality. Technically you could get away with a double equality here, but as I mentioned in the conditional video, definitely always use strict equality or strict not equality. So if it is equal to cat, the instructions are to print out meow, because that's what cats do. And then it's asking if it's equal to dog, so not equal to cat, then we want to print out woof. So this is kind of tricky, right? Because if you read further into instructions, you can see that, well, we also have this case, right? So if it's neither cat nor dog, then we have to print out this other message. So one thing you might have tried is like else, and then we can say console.log woof, just like that. Okay, but this is actually not going to work, because if we have this in the future to be 3 potential values, then we're going to get this in the wrong case, or we're going to get basically wrong behavior, because we're not only checking one thing or another thing, we're actually having 3 different things that we want to test for. So this is a little bit of a hint that we kind of either want a series of if statements, or in this case, since they're all related to the same variable animal, and this is all mutually exclusive of each other, we could just use an else if statement. So I'll kind of show both ways really quickly. So what we could do is we could say if animal is equal to dog, just like this, then we can take this console log right here and print that out. So that would work. And then it's kind of tempting to try to figure out, okay, well, where do we put this thing, right? It must be an alien. So if I copy that string right here and I put it in this else, this might seem like it'll work, right? And what we'll see is that it actually is going to be a bit of a bug in our program. So I'll show you what I mean. The very last thing we need to do here, since we'll skip step 6 for now, is just print out this last message right here. So I'm just going to do a console log for that. And that is the end of our program. So just to recap, we have this kind of console log up here and down here, which is always going to run. We have animal starting out as the string cat. So we expect this to be true, right? So this is going to print out meow. But if you look down here, I want you to think of what might happen. All right. So I'll just kind of clear my console here and I'll run this, problem set 1 in this case. And you can see that we're almost right. Funny, right? Because a lot of people probably would consider cats to be aliens, but in this case this was not actually what we want, because the instructions were to print out if it's neither a cat nor a dog, then we want to print out this message. So actually this program should only really be printed out this message, and then one of these 3 messages, not 2 and not 3. Okay, so the reason this happens is because we pass this first check right here, where animal is not equal to cat, or is equal to cat, sorry, and we print out meow, which is what this statement is right here. Okay, so that should be pretty self-explanatory. However, this is where the bug kind of happens and we get a bit tripped up. We have if animal is equal to dog, so we know cat is not equal to dog, right? So this is actually going to be false. But we know that if there's an else statement that's attached to an if statement, it's going to run every single time the if part fails. So in this case, since this part is failing right here, this is the else that's actually going to be run. Okay, so in the case of cat, since cat is not equal to dog, we're going to fall into this else clause. So anytime we don't enter dog, we're going to fall into the else clause. In the case we do enter dog, we're going to enter this clause right here. So if I just show that to you really quick, if I change this to dog, let's see what happens. You'll see that we do get the correct behavior, but once we switch it to cat, it will be incorrect. In fact, if we switch this to, let's say, monkey, and I run this, little bit cut off by my circle there, but you can see that this program actually works for every case except for where it's equal to cat, okay, which is not what we want. So there's a bit of a bug here because it's considering cat to be effectively not a dog in this case, which is not what we want. So we need to modify this slightly. There are a couple ways to do this. One is we can check to see like very strictly over here if animal is equal to dog and it's not equal to cat. Okay, but that's a bit more complex. What I'm going to do instead is use one of the behaviors that we learned and just change this to an else if, right? So the way that this is going to change things is we're going to only execute one of these statements. Okay, and the key here is this else if in the middle instead of it just being another if statement. This ties all of these statements together. Okay, so we're going to ask, is animal equal to cat? Let me switch this back to cat. And in this case, it is equal to cat, so we're going to run meow. And then since we've already passed one of these tests, we're going to skip everything else in the rest of this conditional block. All right, so if I run this, you'll see that I get only meow now, run when it's cat, which is exactly what we want. So let's test dog really quick. Let's look at this before we run it. We can see that we're going to fail this first check because dog is not equal to cat. We're going to check is dog equal to dog, and it is, so we're going to see woof. And since we've passed this, we're actually not going to run the else because we only run, again, one block inside of this chain of if, else. Okay, so we should only see woof being printed right here. And if we do something like monkey over here, and I run this, you can see that we get the correct behavior, which is must be an alien. Okay, I encourage you to post in the comments for other solutions to this, especially the one where it's a bit more of a complex kind of if statement that's a bit more strict, that's checking if it's cat and not dog or dog and not cat, for example. But I would say this is probably the simplest and easiest to read solution to get you started. All right, let's go to the second exercise. So for this one, we want to create a program that starts with a number variable, so we can call it whatever we want. The goal of this program is when it's run, we want to print out to the screen basically even or odd. Okay, so if we start number as 2, for example, or the variable that we're assigning a number as 2, then we would expect to see even printed out to the screen. And then if it's an odd number like 3 or 7 or something like that, we would expect odd to be printed to the screen. Okay, and make sure you change this variable at the start of the program so that when you run it, you can test that both cases work, very similar to what we did with cat and dog. I'll give you a moment to try that out. Here's a hint if you need help, but we'll go through it in a second. Okay, this is actually a pretty common basic interview question that you might see in various different forms just to get people warmed up as well, like in a coding kind of test interview environment. So it's pretty good to practice this stuff so you get pretty familiar with it. So let's create a number variable. I'm going to say let's just say HP equal to 100. So 100 is an even number. All right. And our goal is to check if this number, if HP in this case, which is the name of my variable for this number variable, is that an even number? The trick here is how do we check if something is even? The modulus operator is the best way to do this. This gives us the remainder of one number with another number. So how can we use this number to actually tell us if a number is even or odd? Well, it turns out if we do something like this, if we test that this variable modulus 2 is equal to 0, just like this. So we're asking the question, is this variable that the label is label being pointed to by HP, which is 100 in this case, if 100 mod 2, which is going to evaluate to 0 in this case, because there's no remainder when you do this division, then we want to run this code. And I'm going to console.log even. Okay, you can see that my single quotes turned to double quotes as a result of my editor kind of doing these autocompletes for me. And then else, it must be odd, because a number can either be even or it can be odd. It cannot be both. Okay. I'll show you how we can flip this around if you wanted to start with odd as well. So let me just show this running just to prove that it actually works. And then I'll kind of go through it really quick. So problem set 2 in this case, we get even. So if I change this to 101, which is an odd number, you can see that this gets odd. And this will work for any number, right? If I do 1001, that's still odd. So that's still going to work. And if I do 1000 exactly, or let's just say 10,002, which is an even number, I'm going to clear this so I get some space, you can see that that's even. Okay. So the way that this works is we're taking any number and we're doing a modulus of 2, which is checking to see the remainder. And we're checking to see if that remainder with 2 is 0. It turns out that when you do modulus 2, you really can only get 2 values. You can get 0 or you can get 1. You get 0 if it's even, and you get odd if it's, or you get 1 if it's odd, sorry. I'll leave it as an exercise to you to actually write that down. So practice it on paper, do something like 3 mod 2, 4 mod 2, 5 mod 2, and do the division and actually see what the remainder ends up being and convince yourself that this is always going to be true no matter what the first number that we're doing the modulus with ends up being, as long as we're modulusing by 2. Okay. So if we wanted to flip this around a little bit, we could have tested if HP in this case, mod 2 is equal to 1, and that would give us the odd case, and we could test for odd up here. Or you can check if it's not equal to 0. There's many different modifications you can do to determine if it's odd first or even first. So I'll leave it up to you again as an exercise to try that out. But that's the hint that you can go with to actually get that working. Okay, perfect. Let's go to exercise 3. So this one's a little bit different. I actually have a bunch of code already written out. This also happens quite often in interviews, so it's definitely good practice. It turns out that this code actually has a bug. There's an error with this code and it doesn't run correctly. What we're seeing is that this code should print out most places consider you an adult, right? Which is this line of code right here, line 17 in my case. But it actually doesn't print that out, right? So I'll let you write that down. But as you're doing that, I'll just run this. Problem set 3 and show you that I get that you are an elementary school kid, right? So I'm actually getting this printed out instead. Okay, I want it so that this gets printed out because this is the correct case in this case with this series of statements when the age is equal to 20. So don't change age to make this work. The only thing you should be changing to actually see if this flow of code actually makes sense logically is figuring out how to modify kind of this block of code right here, this series of if, else if, and else's. Okay, definitely a bit tricky. Try to think of why it's actually printing out this when we want it to actually print out this, which is a more logical answer, and just some changes you can make to make that actually happen. Give you a moment to try that out. Okay, so the trick here was that the order of these statements actually matters a lot. That is one of the tricky things with these else if blocks. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, one good thing to do to get practice of and get in the habit of doing is actually walking through the code as you're doing these problems. So if I start age as 20, let's go through this code and see what ends up happening. So we're asking the question, is age less than 3? So let's just substitute age for 20. So is 20 less than 3? No, it's not less than 3, right? So we're gonna skip this block right here. Then we're gonna check this next else if block. We're asking, is 20 greater than or equal to 3? Well, yes, 20 is definitely greater than or equal to 3. So we're gonna print out you are in elementary school, right? But we said, wait, we want to print this out, right? Because it kind of makes more sense that this case where you're greater than 18 gets printed out, not the one where it's a bit more loose, which is greater than or equal to 3. Okay, so it turns out the easiest way to do this, there's a few ways you can switch this code around actually. The easiest way is this. We just kind of take this block of code right here and we take it out and then we replace it right here, just like that. So I just cut out the age greater than or equal to 18 and I moved it up. All right, so now if we walk through this, let's see what happens. So we're saying, is 20 less than 3? It's not, right? That doesn't change. But now we're asking, instead of if it's greater than or equal to 3, we're asking, is it greater than or equal to 18? And it is greater than or equal to 18. That's totally fine. So we're actually going to print out most places consider you an adult. So if I run this now, we'll see that I get most places consider you an adult, which is the correct answer. But there's still a little bit of a bug in this code. If I put anything less than 18, or above 3 in this case, but less than 18, I'm actually going to hit this block, right? So let me show that to you real quick. So if I say something like I'm 10 years old, or actually I'll say, sorry, I said less than 13, let's say I'm 14 years old, I want to be a teenager, so I kind of want to see that this case runs where I am a teenager, but if I run this code, we'll see, oops, pressed the wrong button there, we'll see that I'm in elementary school, this is the one that's running, which is not what we want. We want this to run. So it's actually the same case that we just saw. We would want this to actually come above. So technically, to make this really, really correct, I would cut that out and I'd put that over here, and then I'd rearrange the code just like this. And now this code should actually run correctly no matter what is actually happening with age. So if I run this again, I'll get I'm a teenager, and if I change this to say I'm 9 years old, then I should be very much in elementary school. Okay, so definitely a tricky one. This is a really, really important one where you get practice with seeing that the order of these else-if statements actually makes a big difference when you're organizing it this way. There are other ways to code these checks so that they're actually mutually exclusive of each other explicitly, and they don't rely on the order. However, you would have to kind of put in more code and use like the logical operators like and or things like that, and compare age to that. I'll leave that as an exercise to you. I encourage you to post those answers in the comments as well so we can have a discussion on it. But that's it for these problem sets. I hope that they were useful for you. Definitely practice these as much as you can and manipulate these and try to make errors happen or unexpected behavior happen. That's the best way to actually get practice and get better at this, so that when you see these in real life, or they come up in things like interviews, or when you're helping others during pair programming, that it's much easier to spot these errors. So I hope you enjoyed these practice problems together. If you would like more practice, definitely ask me in the comments, and I'll try to come up with more questions for all of you. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear what you think of these problem sets in the comments, if they're too easy, if they're too hard, or kind of they were spot on, or any questions you might have gotten that you weren't able to solve. In the next video, what we're going to do is go over loops for the first time, which is a really, really exciting topic. We're actually going to split up loops into two types of loops, while loops and for loops, and we're going to be starting with the while loops. So a brand new topic that's going to allow us to run code repeatedly, which is one thing that computers are really, really good at, and we can actually combine these concepts together with conditionals and loops to make even more complex and interesting programs. Super excited to get to that. I'll see you in the next video.